Hey pilots, DrainMan here, and today I have got a very special video, a highly requested video. In today's video, we are going to learn how to set up, bind, wire, and get in the air with the TBS Sixty9. I recently did a review on this board, and guys keep asking me, how do we set it up? So in this video, I'm going to show you guys how to set it up. Let's go! Alright pilots, so this is going to be short, sweet, simple, and to the point. What we're going to do is I'm going to bust the package open. I'm going to show you how to wire it up. Then I'm going to show you how to update your TX, show you how to update your RX. Then I'm going to show you how to bind it. And then we're going to make sure that everything works and how to set up Betaflight. So let's dive right in. So the first thing we need to do is crack this puppy open. So when you get your package, it will look like this. Boom. Dump out your contents, and I'm not going to review the contents that are inside of here because I already have, and if you want to see that review, I will put a link for you down in the video description. Alright, so inside of this bag we've got our different packages, but what we're looking for is this board right here. So what we're going to need in order to set this up is we're going to need our board, our connector, because we don't want to power up without an antenna. We're going to need our wiring harness, although you can wire directly. You can hard wire. And then we're going to need our Crossfire Immortal T V2. Alright, so we're going to need an antenna because you don't want to power up with it. I'm just going to grab this random antenna. I didn't select this for any certain reason. It was just the nearest one to me. So I've screwed that in and I'm going to set that aside. Next, what you want to get is your wiring harness and your board, and we are going to plug it in. Boom. Okay? You're going to want to mount this inside of your stack, inside of your build, whether it's in the back, in the front, in the middle, doesn't matter, whatever you want. Inside of the package is different options for mounting. You can use double-side sticky tape. You can use the screws in the heatsink. You can use 20 by 20, 30 by 30. You use whatever works for you. All right, what we're going to do now is I'm going to grab a stack, just any old stack. I'm using this one just because it's nearby. I haven't put it in a quad yet, so the perfect excuse to solder on it. This one is an ESC flight controller combo, and all we really need to be able to wire this up is the flight controller, but I want to be able to show you on a full stack. Now, the first thing to understand about your new TBS Crossfire 69 is that its voltage range is 5.5 all the way up to 36. The reason why this is important is because the 5.5 means, unlike the regular Crossfire Nano, you cannot just stick this on any old 5-volt pad. It just won't power it. You need 5.5 as a minimum. So that means if your flight controller does not have a large beck on it, every flight controller has a 3.3 volt rail and every flight controller has a 5 volt rail. They need them. You gotta have it. There's just so many things on these boards that require those too. So it'd be nice if it did take 5 volts, but it won't. It needs 5.5. Well, these days with DJI and all this other stuff going on, there's lots and lots of BECs available. Some flight controllers will have a 12 volt BEC, some will have a 10 volt BEC, some may even have a 9 volt. Whatever, maybe you've got a 7, it doesn't matter. Anything that's higher than 5.5, you're good to go. And because even if you're running a 6-cell battery, your highest voltage will be 25.2, so you don't have to worry about giving it too much voltage. Now, with that being said, if you don't have a voltage rail larger than 5 volts available, you're going to have to wire your power directly to the battery lead. Coming out of the harness, we've got multiple wires here. So your very first wire is this red wire right here, and this wire is your actual power wire. That's where you'll connect either to the XT60 or if you've got a higher voltage rail available. 6 volt, 7 volt, 9 volt, 10, 12, whatever available, you will wire that there. Anything higher than 5.5, all the way up. The next wire is your ground wire. Every positive must have a ground. If you're soldering your power directly to the XT60, you would want to use this ground, and you'd want to connect it to the ground on your XT60, and that would be right here. So if your positive's going here, your ground's going here. If you're using a BEC off the board, then you would use a ground off that board. All right, so here we go. You've got your flight controller. First thing we need to do is we need to power our board. So remember, if you have a BEC, go for it. If you don't have a BEC, don't go for it. If you have a BEC and you're using that BEC to, let's say, power a DJI Air unit, well then fine. Don't try to piggyback on top of there. You don't want to overload that BEC and fry it. So what you'll do is put your Air unit onto the BEC and put your 69 onto the XT60 lead. I've got a ground and a 10 volt right here. That's these two pads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of solder on ground, and I'm going to put a little bit of solder on 10 volt. All right. Now I'm going to head over to my TBS Sixty9. I'm going to grab my red and black wires, the very first two, and I'm going to strip them and tin them. I'll grab my positive and I'll come over to, that's right, my 10 volt, and bloop, solder that up. I'll grab my ground and I'll solder that up. All right, so can you see that? I've got my red and black wire coming directly from over here, right over to my flight controller. I now have power. So if I turn this on, it will actually power my 69. I would show you, but I'm sure you believe me. All right, so the next thing we're gonna need, because I have no interest in running a microphone, but if you do, it's very simple. Audio, ground, you can't screw it up. White, black, done. I am going to run my camera off of my flight controller. I have 5 volts on here. I've got Betaflight OSD. Why would I not? So if you don't have that luxury, I mean, go ahead and use your 5 volt out like we talked about. Connect that to the camera. All right, so your next wire is your 5 volt out, your ground, your audio, and your audio ground. That's 4 wires that if you're not using, you don't need. If you're going to power your camera with the 5 volt out, well then obviously don't get rid of it. And if you're going to use a microphone, obviously don't get rid of it. But what I'm going to do is show you how to actually de-pin the wire. If you know how to do it, great, just do it. If you don't know how to do it, I'm going to show you now, because the last thing you want to do is cut wires and leave open wires available to touch something and short out and just create a big mess. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our RX and our TX and we're going to throw them to the side so nothing bad happens. And then I'm going to grab the ground for my audio, and I'm just going to take my razor blade and I'm going to lift up on that little white tab, and I'm going to slide that out. Now I'm going to grab my audio, which is the white wire, and I'm going to slide that out. I want to keep my video, but I don't need my 5 volt out, and I don't need my ground for the 5 volt out. So let's pull that out. And lastly, I'm going to pull that out. Now what we're going to do is we are going to grab the yellow wire, because this is your video. You are going to need video if you want to fly FPV. I'm going to also take my green and white, which is my RX and TX. I will strip off the end. All right, so jumping back into our flight controller, you want to find your video connection. It may say V, it may say video, it may say VTX, it may say V out, you know, for video out. It may say any one of these things. Feel free to pull up the pinout for your flight controller to figure out which one yours is. I already spotted mine. Mine is actually neatly right here next to the ground and the voltage. It's right there, and it says VTX. So I'm going to take some solder and I'm going to go ahead and tin that pad. Boom. And I'm going to go ahead and solder that up. All right. So there you go. I've now got video, power, and ground. I'm like 90% done with wiring up my Crossfire 69. The next thing we're going to need is a full UART. All right, if you have wired up a Crossfire Nano, this is the same exact thing. You're going to just need a full UART. So figure out which UART is available on your flight controller. If you're unfamiliar, let's take a look. We've got UART 6 available, and what makes it a full UART is TX and RX, which is transmit and receive. We've got a full UART here with TX6, RX6. We've got TX1 and RX1, and all a UART is a hardware communication protocol that allows for different devices to communicate. Multiple things will connect to a UART. Crossfire receiver is one of them. You don't need it for the video transmitter. It's all built into one, so there it is. We need an open UART. So for me, I'm going to use TX2 and RX2. Not for any certain reason. It's just not being used, and I want to use it. So what I'm going to do is grab my soldering iron, and I'm going to head over to TX2 and RX2, which happens to be, oh look, there's TX4 and RX4. I found another UART. Feel free to use any one that you want as long as it's not being used. Sometimes a good practice is just to stay away from UART1, TX1, RX1, because a lot of times they're being used. So let's go ahead and head over to TX2 and RX2. It's right here, TX and RX. All right, now, heading over to our wires, because when you buy this, you get the actual harness, I can go ahead and correlate that with the color, because when I say green is this and white is that, it is that, because it doesn't matter who bought it, you're getting the same harness. But in any other world, you could just use any wires you want. If you decide not to use the harness and you want to hardwire it, you can use any color that your little heart desires. All right, so you've got your green, which is TX. So watch me. I'm going to grab my green wire, which is my TX wire. I'm going to head over here to the flight controller, and I'm going to solder this where it says RX, which is down here. And why is that? That's because TX goes to RX. Now I'm going to grab my white wire, which is my RX. And where does it go? You got it. It goes to my TX. So I'm going to grab my white wire and I'm going to solder it right here to my TX. All right, so there we go. Fancy schmancy pansies. I've got my voltage, I've got my ground, my video, and my complete UART connected. I am ready to fully get the most out of this board. All right, so with that being fully wired, what I shall do is I'm going to use this little XT60 plug right here, just so that I have a way to power this up and show you. All right, so this would be a part of your build, so you really don't have to worry about this part. But for me, I do need a way to power this so I can show you, and I'm not going to deal every time with my power supply. So I'm going to connect my ground, and I'm going to connect my positive. Boom. All right. So now I actually have a plug that I can plug in and power up my flight controller, my ESC, and my 69. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and plug it in, and I'm going to connect my antennas. So right here, you're going to see there's a little RC and an arrow pointing to this UFL connector right here. And then I'm going to drop on my Immortal T to that side, and then I will grab my VTX antenna and I will connect it right here where it says VTX. So if you were unsure about that, you don't have to be unsure anymore. All right, so with that connected, I'm going to also do something very El Smarto, and I'm going to use a smoke stopper. I never ever recommend just full-on LiPo to your board without actually checking it first. So I'm going to grab my battery, I'm going to plug in my smoke stopper, then I'm going to power up. Boom. And as you'll see, my stack is turning on and my 69 is turning on. So I know that I'm safe to plug in full LiPo. All right, so the next thing to do is to go ahead and flash new firmware to our TX. If you've got a Crossfire module, it could be the TX Lite, it could be the full size, it could be the micro, it could be the nano. Whatever it is that you got going on, you're going to want to update the firmware on that. All right, so let's go ahead and update the firmware on our TX. Then we'll go ahead and we'll update firmware on our RX. We'll bind the two, and I'll show you how to set it up. When I uploaded Agent X, it immediately asked me if I wanted to update. So I clicked yes. I went ahead and updated my Agent X. It loaded the firmware, and then right from there, it rebooted the whole new software. Then it loaded up my TBS Cloud profile. Right from there, I went ahead and checked my firmware, and now my agent is on a more current firmware, 3.0.42. I was not on that version prior. So right here, you'll find a line for Agent ID where TBS can actually address a specific code to you, and you can enter it into there and flash a specific firmware for a specific issue. How cool is that? So heading back over, I went ahead and connected my Micro TX. I have all new firmware available. I have a version 6.09. So I went ahead and I updated it and flashed it. You just simply press the update button and let it move through its process. Once it's done, you head back over, go back to your devices, and you'll see right here that our firmware has been updated. We are now on 6.09. Jumping into the release notes, you'll see there's all types of updates, including smart audio control on output 1 and output 4 for Betaflight to control your 69, which you don't really need because you can just control it from the configuration inside of the radio. Now with my new firmware set, all I have to do is press bind. Once you click bind with your receiver on, it will automatically grab, and then right over the air, it will update the firmware of your receiver. You'll get a flashing green light, and then ultimately, you'll reach a solid green light, which lets you know that you've actually connected. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do a simple power up. And you can see with our 69 powered up, we have a solid red light. And as soon as the radio grabs link, boom, we've got a solid green light. That lets us know that it's working. We've got full bars. The 69 is pumping. Okay, so once you're all set up and ready to go, you'll see that you have radio link. And then you can head over into your menu. And from your menu, you want to head over to your configures page or your tools, depending on your radio. Head down to Crossfire. When you open it up, as long as you're bound, you'll see that you've got your TX. Me, I've set up Wi-Fi. I do have a video if you're interested in that. And then you head down to your 69. Once you click it, you've got full control over your VTX. Me, I like to be on race band. I like channel 1. And we all know I like max power. Lastly, if you head down, you'll see my frequency is on 868 and my brand new firmware of 6.09. Once you connect, you want to head over to the ports tab. From the ports tab, you need to select your serial RX. That is the UART that you used to make your receiver work. So we soldered up our 69 in the video to UART2. That's TX2 and RX2. So you'll go ahead and select UART2. With that selected, you need to save and reboot. Once that reboots, we need to head over to configuration. You want to scroll on down and you want to click on a serial-based receiver. That's this option right here. It was already selected, but go ahead and select it. This is not an S bus, so you'll drop the drop down and you'll head all the way down to CRSF. That is Crossfire. This 69 has a built-in Crossfire. It's a Crossfire Nano mixed with a VTX all in one. So as long as you click Crossfire, you're good to go. Once you've done that, you'll click Save and Reboot. Now you can head over to receiver, and as you'll see, all of my controls are working. My quad is freaking out, and that's because my channel mapping's wrong, so I'll go ahead and change that. Alright, so there you go. If I spin my yaw, pitch, roll, throttle, everything's all good. I've even got switches working already. Look at that. Nice and magical.
Turtle mode.
Yep.
Turtle mode.
Turtle mode's on and working. So now from this point, you can move on to setting up your modes, setting up your motors, and all the other things that you want to set up and get rolling. If you need help on any of that stuff, I do have a beta flight playlist. Feel free to dip into that and get a little bit of knowledge. If you're new to all of this stuff, I hope that this has been helpful. I am truly excited about this 69. If you're flying analog, this is truly a revolution. I mean, if you're a racer, even more so. I'm super excited. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one.